Hey, and welcome back to another installment of Off the Beaten Path. In today's episode, we're meeting up with Zack Albetta, drummer for the national Broadway tour of Ain't Too Proud to Beg. Unlike previous episodes, where I've traveled to the home base of whatever studio, store, or workshop I've featured on the series, I was able to meet up with Zack not in his home base of Atlanta, Georgia, but at the Fox Cities Performing Arts Center in Appleton, Wisconsin, a mere 30 minutes away from where my home is in Oshkosh. I've been following Zack on social media for years because in addition to being a successful touring musician, he's also one of two hosts on Working Drummer podcast. This weekly show has released over 400 episodes with not only household name drummers you know, but plenty of ground level drummers making a living in music. When he initially made the announcement on social media about joining this tour, I was excited to see that he'd be making a week-long stop right in my community, and I made sure to let him know that I'd love to connect while he was in town. Zack was kind enough to arrange me coming down into the pit on load-in day and give us a behind-the-scenes look at what it's like touring with a Broadway show. But in addition to exploring this component of Zack's career, we also got together again later in the week at my house to sit down and talk about what he's doing with Working Drummer podcast. Before we jump in, I'll take this one chance to remind you that I'm releasing new episodes in this series each month, and if you enjoy this content, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on future video releases. So enough from me, let's hear it from the man himself, Zack Albetta.
Greetings.
Hey, Zack.
Step into my office. So this is the ISO booth where I live for the Ain't Too Proud tour. It's fully enclosed, right? There's a door that kind of attaches here that's not on right now, but in a little bit they'll come and put that on. So it is fully enclosed, and a lot of Broadway productions, a lot of theater productions are doing it this way these days. Everything is remote. I have video monitors for conductor and the stage, and the sound crew can just completely isolate my sound, completely control it so that we have consistent sound from theater to theater. And as as anybody who's played a bunch of different theaters is aware, acoustically it's a crapshoot. So the more that can be consistent from week to week, the better. This rig is one that was kind of installed on the tour by my predecessor, Q Robinson. It is a gorgeous pearl reference pure in this natural matte finish, and I've got all Aquarian heads on it, single ply coated top and bottom. I, like Q, am a Sabian guy, so this drum set is not mine, but this snare and these plates are mine. It's 22 by 18, 10, 12, 16. I've got the toms especially tuned pretty high and dry, hence the coated heads on top and bottom. I don't want a ton of low end from the toms out there swimming around in the house. And I actually did a YouTube video for the Reddit drum sub about how I use mic placement and proximity effect and drum tuning in here to get a certain effect out there. And it basically means, cutting it, like not cutting out low end, but just really controlling low end and sustain and sympathetic vibrations to clean up the mix. This snare is the only non-pearl thing on the kit. This is an early 80s hammered shell Ludwig Superphonic. And this is a snare that I got on this tour for this tour. We were in LA, and a buddy of mine there, great drummer named Christopher Alice, loaned me this snare basically. We were hanging out having lunch, and I was telling him how I did not own a Superphonic. And I was telling him, like, everybody needs a Superphonic. I need a Superphonic just in general, but I would really love to have one for this show. And Chris said, well, do you want to borrow one? And I was like, man, I'm out like indefinitely. I don't know when you're gonna get it back. He's like, that's cool, I got a great one. Just take it with you. I played it for a few months and loved it immediately, and we were coming up on Nashville. And I knew that I was gonna go to Nelson Drum Shop in Nashville and just check that out. And I called Christopher and I said, are you gonna sell me this thing, or do I need to start looking for my own? So yeah, these are all Sabian cymbals. I've been a Sabian endorser since about 2018, I guess. And this is kind of a mix of stuff I already had and stuff I bought for the show. So this is, I guess we'll go left to right. This is one of the first Sabian cymbals I ever got, the AAX thin 18-inch crash. And this AAX line I just think of as like just middle of the road in the best sense of the phrase. They're just so versatile. They're really just like when I picture the sound of a crash in my mind, it's this. This little guy is a 16-inch HHX complex thin. I recently took a chunk out of it because I cracked it. There's another one waiting for me at home. But this is like a little higher pitched, splashier. And I use these two cymbals specifically in different ways. This one's like darker, gushier. It'll bite if you lay into it, but if there's a lot of crashes, like if there's a crash on a downbeat with no vocals, there's a lot of vocal phrases that like start on beat 2 or, you know, sometime after 1. So if there's a big one, you know, a big crash on 1 with no vocals, I'll lay into this one or this 19 here. If I'm hitting a crash on the downbeat with a vocal phrase, I'll use this one because it's higher pitched, it's out of the vocal range, it kind of hits and gets out of the way. This is an AAX brilliant finish explosion crash. This is just like the big rock and roll crash. So between these 3 crashes, I've got 3 different voices, sort of from highest pitch to medium to lowest, from sharpest attack to medium to softest attack. This is just the white noise thing. I guess this qualifies as a crash. This is an Evolution or HHX ozone crash, and there are a couple of moments in the show that just kind of require that psh, white noise, you know, thing. One of them is a moment where one of the characters gets hit in the face with a bottle, so that's that. And then some of the heavier, you know, more rock-ish moments call for this guy as well. The ride I'm using is one of the new 22-inch low bell anthology rides. When I was in LA, I got to go to the Sabian office and hang out with Chris Stanky, the artist rep. By that point, I had been playing the show for 6 weeks or something, and I kind of had a good idea of, you know, the sounds I wanted for this show. So it turned out to be this 22-inch anthology. These hi-hats are the 15-inch Artisans. On that visit to the Sabian office, these were, I think, the first thing I tried out because I really wanted to get the hi-hats right. And I tried 4 or 5 other pairs of hats, but it ended up being these. You know, fortunately, the audio team here has been super receptive to me sort of shaping the drum sound to something that I'm comfortable with and happy with. And it's, you know, it's something that I encourage drummers to do. Like if you've got some audio chops, if you know how to mic drums, if you know how to tune your drums, if you're working with a sound person that's open to it, like be in dialogue with that person. And, you know, they know stuff you don't know and you know stuff they don't know when it comes to miking drums. So if you can create a dialogue with them and just have this conversation about like, how are we going to work together to shape this drum sound.
I feel like specifically on this show where the music is the legacy of a artist from 60s and 70s, finding equipment that maybe matches the era or kind of sonic palette of that scene, the Motown music, is important and hard to do with modern equipment.
Definitely. And we've got to kind of thread a needle because like we can't go all the way vintage with these sounds. Because it's a big modern production, you know, it won't translate. But, you know, we want to kind of allude to that old school sound. So this is obviously a modern drum set. These are modern cymbals. But in the way the show is mixed and, you know, the way I'm choosing to play, not just with the tones and colors, but, you know, the actual vocabulary, you know, the show in a lot of ways is trying to walk this line between the old school and the modern. It's not just about the instruments or the players, like the choreography does that too. The choreography obviously, you know, borrows directly from what the Temptations did, but there's kind of like, there's some 80s pop, kind of Paula Abdul, Michael Jackson type shit. There's some hip hop influence in the choreography. And also in the vocal performance, like you know, you'll hear the show tonight. There are some vocal moments that are just like perfectly old school, and some that are very modern, because these are obviously younger performers of, you know, a 21st century generation, and they have their own influences, and within reason, they can sort of fold those influences and those styles into their performance.
For the people who haven't been in a pit before, I always find kind of one of the cooler aspects, especially in these more modern remote setups, is you're not actually relying as much visual eye contact directly with a conductor or stage manager.
Yeah.
Or even turning pages on a physical book anymore.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, this setup, I'll show you this. Here's my iPad with all my charts on it. This is how I turn pages. This is the air turn tap, and it's just a Bluetooth pad trigger. So yeah, just in the middle of playing, I'm doing that to just turn pages. I've played so many gigs, you've played so many gigs, whether it's theater or big band or whatever, where you've got your music stand over here.
Yeah.
And you spend 2 hours like this, and it's just the worst. But I really wanted to get everything in front of me for this gig, because this is a 2 hour and 45-minute show. I'm doing it 8 times a week, and I would like to just face forward for that time.
Yeah, and I think unlike a big band gig where you might have your stand off to the left, you don't have to worry about obstructing anyone's view of you.
Right.
Performing, you're not on stage, so you can kind of dismiss that right away.
Totally, yeah. That's one of the benefits of being in a box, because there are pros and cons. It took me a while to get used to. You know, I don't really like being separated and isolated from not only the other musicians, but from the audience, from the actors on stage. You know, most of the musicals I've ever played, you're in the pit, in the open air, and you can just, you know, be in that room with the audience and the actors and everything. So I miss, you know, being in the room with them in that way. But there are other benefits to just being totally isolated in here that make my job easier. That is my AC unit. This is Diana, one of our props people.
Hello.
So like when I'm sealed in there, it gets hot and gross. So they set me up there with this AC unit. So another thing that a lot of musicals are doing, whether they're on Broadway or touring or whatever, is putting a lot of members of the band in a remote space. So we've got what we call bangers and blowers in here. We've got horns, 3 horns, trumpet, trombone, and sax in this trap room, and 2 percussionists over there. There's kind of a conga station and a, you know, tambo cowbell toy station. They are almost always remote with this show. Sometimes circumstances just dictate that they have to be in the pit with us, but anytime it's possible, they are isolated.
Today's Tuesday,
Yep.
opening night for you here in Appleton.
Yep.
And then you'll be here playing 8 shows.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then on to the next on Monday.
On to Des Moines, Iowa on Monday. Yeah, we typically spend a week in each city. Sometimes it's more. If it's a really big market, we'll spend 2 or 3 or even 4 weeks in a city. But yeah, we're here in Appleton for a week, and the usual rhythm of the week is we travel Monday, get to wherever we're going. Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. we have a rehearsal with local musicians, because our traveling band is 5 members. It's keys 1, musical director, keys 2, guitar, bass, and drums. In each city locally, we hire 7 local musicians through the union. So 2 strings, 3 horns, 2 percussion. So the band ends up being a dozen. So on Tuesday morning, we have to rehearse with those people. That goes until about 1:30. After that, I come down here, load in this drum set, get set up, and then I go take a nap, walk the dog, get dinner, whatever. We have a 5 o'clock sound check in here that's just instrumental. We have a 5:45 sound check with the cast members on stage, and then we have a 7:30 show. So Tuesday is our hump day. Tuesday is our big, long, work hard day. Then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night shows. 2 shows Saturday, matinee and evening. 2 shows Sunday, matinee and evening. Travel Monday. That's the rhythm of the week. If we spend more than 1 week in a city, then that Monday in the middle becomes a true day off, because we don't have to travel, we don't have to play. It is a true day off. They call them golden days.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the show tonight.
Dude, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad you reached out, and I'm excited for you to see the show, and I really appreciate you coming down and having a look.
Yeah, and we're gonna follow up on this after that show.
Yes, sir.
All right, so I saw the show on Tuesday. Amazing.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thank you, man.
Yeah, it was awesome, and I'm so grateful that you invited me and we got to see the pit. But one of the reasons I really wanted to include you on this series was, in addition to doing the touring Broadway show, for a number of years you've been involved in kind of one of the two halves of Working Drummer podcast.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit different than some other podcasts, because instead of solely focusing on household names, you guys have taken drummers from kind of the ground floor, the ones who are really hustling, working in all sorts of markets, and bring them on the show to talk about their experience. And I've found it invaluable to what I do as a musician.
Oh, I'm glad.
So,
thanks, man.
why don't you talk a little bit about how that has all come to be and where you're at with it now?
Yeah, so I joined Matt Krause as his co-host in 2015, and by that time he had been doing it for almost a year, just kind of on his own, and with the help of a guy named Mike Jackson on the tech side. Yeah, Matt and I got hooked up through Nick Ruffini. He kind of played matchmaker with us, because I was writing some articles that were like in the same vein as the podcast that Matt was doing. So Matt was fortunately just super open to, taking on a partner. He didn't know me from Adam, but, we just got on the phone and talked about it, and, discovered that we had that we were like-minded about what we wanted to do. And yeah, we're happy to interview a big fish if it comes our way, and we've gotten quite a few, but the focus of our podcast has been, like you said, people on the ground level in whatever community they're in, whether it's Nashville or LA or Oshkosh, Wisconsin. We've discovered that almost anywhere you go, there's a great music scene, there are great musicians, there are people making a living, and everybody's definition of success is different. Everybody's path to it is different. There's no one way to do it. There's no one way to have a career in music. And we're over 400 episodes in, and still learning new things and new stories and new paths.
One thing I've really enjoyed from being a long-time listener is I've gotten to kind of follow your path personally. And honestly, a couple of my favorite episodes were the ones where you and Matt and Nick did like a round table talking about all your lives. Because I'd been listening to you for so many episodes and getting little trinkets of your path, whether it comes up in conversation with someone else or kind of just filling us in. And so when you started doing the show, I think you were still living in LA.
Yeah.
And I remember a kind of period of the show where you were in transition moving to Atlanta, where you had no real contacts, I think.
Pretty much zero.
And got to kind of see, like, you use the podcast as a tool to help meet new musicians too. So when you moved there, oh, a lot of these guys are out of Atlanta. Matt being in Nashville, a lot of his stuff was kind of in that spirit. And then your stuff was like, okay, now we're going to have the heavy jazz guy or a little bit different flavor.
Right.
And then I remember when you interviewed Q and listening to that one when he was playing on Ain't Too Proud to Beg.
I originally had Q on in 2018 before he was doing any of this. Like he was he was an Atlanta guy. He was touring with Avery Sunshine and doing some studio work. Like he was in the R&B circuit. So I interviewed him then, we became friends. And then, you know, all this stuff for him in the Broadway world with Ain't Too Proud came about. So I had him on again in the middle of his tenure on Ain't Too Proud.
You guys connecting and you inquiring about that led to an opportunity you kind of created for yourself with getting the opportunity to audition and be part of that tour.
Yeah. I mean, the podcast is directly responsible, maybe indirectly, but the podcast is very responsible for me having the gig I have, because I met Q because I wanted to interview him. We were at a drum event in Atlanta. I had just met him. I had heard him play for the first time, and I was like, oh shit, I should interview this guy. So I did, and then we became like close friends. And that led to him sort of like setting me up to replace him on Ain't Too Proud.
So now that you're on tour, you know, most months out of the year, traveling around the country, and you're not on these one-night tours like I was kind of doing when I was touring, you get a chance to come into a city, experience it, maybe connect with people who listen to the show, and then that gives you an opportunity to, instead of doing these virtual interviews when you want to interview someone in LA now or New York, you can come into their space and really experience them and put out a better product. And I'm sure with being on the road, when I was on the road, the toughest thing was keeping myself busy and productive, because it's easy when you're traveling an 8-hour day to just sit and watch a Netflix show. But if you can plan out a podcast or edit a podcast from your laptop in your hotel room or in an airport, can really make the most of your time, as opposed to just kind of being dormant other than the 3 hours you're performing every night.
Right. I sort of look forward to being dormant, actually.
You probably deserve it. Yeah.
And you know, I like you said, I have more downtime with this tour structure. I have a lot more free time than the average touring musician. Yeah, like I feel like I haven't taken full advantage of like exploring every scene I've been in and connecting with people in those scenes. But it has given me the opportunity to either meet new people and connect with them, or seek out people that I already know. It's like, hey, I'm coming to your town. I haven't had you on the podcast. Like, let's get you going. So, you know, we make a date on a Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, which is usually the days that I have most time. So in addition to like, you know, getting content for the podcast, it gives me that much more of an insight into whatever town or whatever scene I'm in. So, you know, I have that time to just like get to know the place, get to know a couple people, eat a bunch of great food.
Yeah.
You know, it's really a treat to get to sort of get a taste and a feel for everywhere I go.
And I can remember the moment when I saw you announce it and put out your schedule that you were going to do that, and I immediately circled it like, oh, you're going to be in my town on X date 8 months from now, but I'm putting this in my calendar. Let's hang out.
And I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful to you for actually making it happen, because like I believed you as soon as you said it. Like you posted on Reddit, you're like, I'm coming. I'm coming to the show. And I was like, you know, sometimes people say that and you're like, well, we'll see if that happens. We'll see if they follow up, whatever. But like, I had no doubt in my mind that you did it. So I'm super grateful to you.
I guess one last shout out too is you had put me in a group chat with Q when he was in Appleton doing Hamilton, because you were already aware. It's like, oh, Mike lives in Appleton. We hung out while he was in town, and that was a beautiful friendship, and we share a lot in common with music we appreciate. So very grateful for you connecting us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to connect anybody with with Q, because he just makes everybody feel good.
Yeah, I sort of feel like he would have a good time with anybody.
He really does. Like he just becomes the mayor of whatever town he shows up in, and is just really great at connecting people and just sort of creating relationships. It's one of the things that I've realized about the podcast is like people talk about networking all the time. and I've come to dislike that word. I think people have to replace the word networking with the phrase creating relationships.
Yeah.
And Q is great at just creating relationships, whether it's with other drummers or with product designers or with the wait staff at a restaurant. Like,
I'm sure. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being a part of this Off the Beaten Path show, and
really appreciate it, man. Thanks for
glad
having
people
me.
got to look into your life a bit.
Appreciate you.
All right. Thanks.